Okay, happy Monday, everybody. Welcome in to the group and welcome to the 3-day info series where we're going to talk about how to eat carbs. I mean, raise your hand if you've ever been told carbs are bad for you. Carbs are what's going to make you overweight. Don't eat the carbs. I mean, hello, all the hands. So we're going to kind of talk about those myths of diet culture and why carbs actually are incredibly vital for our well-being. And I'm super, super excited about this topic because, for one, Joni and I, welcome Joni, we can talk for hours about food, exercise, wine, I mean, all the things. So
Anything.
anything. So I'm so excited to have her here to chat with us today and have a really, really like real raw discussion about carbs, and we're not going to be sugarcoating things. So if you don't already have your workbook with some of the grocery list and recipes, be sure to drop carbs in the comments so I can get you a copy. Um, all right, Joni, we're going to dive in.
All right.
So tell me a little bit about how has your journey with carbs, what does that look like for you?
So I love carbs and not just as a form of fuel, but just as food in general. Some of the best foods are carbohydrates. Um, I am 45 years old. So kind of when the Atkins diet launched in the late 90s and the kind of early 2000s, I found myself kind of right around post college, around 20 years old. And that just took over the kind of diet industry of no carbs, fats are okay. And I really think that's kind of the launching period. And it was so highly promoted and so widely accepted that myself and probably many of you just assumed that was truthful. It was the best thing for me. We have all the celebrities, the good looking celebrities telling us it's how they're making their bodies be camera
Yeah.
ready. And so like I took that as science essentially, and kind of moving a little bit more for down the road. I became a vegetarian and I wasn't getting a lot of protein, and a lot of vegetarians tend to overeat carbohydrates. And so
Mhm.
I was eating a lot of carbohydrates, and as I was gaining weight, I of course just assumed that it was the carbohydrates. Down the road, years later, I'm back to eating meat. It's about 2 years back on the wagon now, give or take. And I've been working out for just the most of my life, and my body has never really been what I envisioned or what I wanted it to be. And so many of us are in that same boat. And so last year, I hired a nutrition coach because I figured I need information that I'm not getting. I need facts. I need guidance. I need somebody who is educated in this process of nutrition to help me alongside, all of my strength training and my wellness practices. And, as I tracked my food for months before I started working with him. And when he kind of opened up my logbook, one of the first things he said is, "You're not eating enough carbohydrates." And I just
You're like, that's
completely
on
taken aback.
purpose.
I'm like, but I'm getting, my few hundred grams of protein a day. And, he basically said to me, carbohydrates are a form of energy. Your body cannot build muscle without carbohydrates as a form of energy. Your body will break down muscle if you're not fueling yourself with carbohydrates. And he's telling me all this in one interview. And he's basically telling me that the color purple is now the color blue. It was all this information that I'd never heard before, because it's not what's necessarily publicized, right? The keto
Yeah.
diet, the paleo diet, all of these much more higher fat kind of diets are what is trending right now. And so I just continued to kind of ask questions and research, just, on Google. for myself to kind of understand the function of carbohydrates, the how essential they are for the body, and in general, just how much better they make me feel. Like a lot of us, I imagine, when we don't have energy, we reach for something that's going to give us energy. I love coffee. Sometimes that's just like a different energy drink for other
Mhm.
people. But I found myself just drinking maybe 3 cups of coffee in the morning because my body was just always asking for more energy. And then just, in elementary or middle school health classes, we learn carbohydrates is a form of energy for the body. Somehow down the road, that completely got lost. I started to listening to information that was just coming from popular culture, from TV, from magazines. Um, and so I I started to look for more kind of science, right? And just thinking earlier this week, kind of running off of the idea that carbs were bad in like, around the year 2000 when the Atkins diet came out.
Yes.
If I still subscribed to that, it would be like the same thing as never updating my computer software for 20
Yes.
years, like so much science has happened and so much more information is out there that
Mhm.
I'd be foolish if I was still kind of subscribing to that. So
Yeah.
I'm no longer like a carbophobe. And also just that kind of cycle that we can get into that, we can deprive ourselves from carbohydrates, and then I imagine many of us have been there. And then our body's going to crave them. So we're going to give it what it needs, right? We're going to binge a carbohydrate, right?
Mhm.
In some, form. And then we get that feeling of guilt. And it's a cycle that I want to break for myself. I'm definitely working, I think I'm over the highest part of the mountain, but it's also
Yeah.
something that, I love to talk about to help people get out of that kind of starve, binge, that guilt cycle, because there's such a better way to live. We all know that.
Absolutely. And that's where I feel like the big shift happened for me was I was becoming aware of that vicious cycle about 2 years ago, that I would binge something. It would be fast food or it would be, some sort of simple carb that gave me that immediate satisfaction because it's got, those high refined sugars. So it's like, boom, I got some energy. I feel satisfied. And then 30 minutes later, I feel guilty and bloated. And I started recognizing that cycle and trying to
Yeah.
really become more mindful about, okay, when I start to feel this way, what was I just doing 30 minutes to an hour before that? What brought me here? What was that bridge? And it was almost always some sort of high sugar, simple carb binge. And it's so fascinating to learn about the gut and digestion and how things like carbohydrates, when they are treated with the respect that they deserve and really, really consumed in an intentional manner, it's incredible what it can do for the body. Like my whole perspective on food, my relationship with food, like you say, I've crossed the highest peak. It was hard. It was hard. That trek up was not easy.
Whew.
And sometimes you slide back a little bit, but being able to do that hard work, get over the hump, and then have the education behind it, whether you're teaching yourself or you're tuning into stuff like this and you're hearing other people talk about it. Because no matter who you are, I guarantee whatever you're experiencing in life, you are not alone. Somebody has experienced something very similar
Absolutely
at
right.
some point or another. So always like reach out, do research, and no two stories are the same. So, like your journey with carbs, although very similar to me, and I'm sure a lot of people on here, is not the same. The things you craved weren't the same as the things I craved. It's all so different. But when you come down to it, the science of it, carbs are vital. I mean, they're one of the three macronutrients. You have to have them. And so many times I talk to women about, weight loss is such a touchy subject. but it's something that almost every woman I've ever encountered, it's always been on her mind from an early age that there's weight that needs to be lost. My body is not, XYZ kind of way. And like you said, somewhere along the way, the Atkins diet, something like that. I remember my mom doing that diet actually. And it became okay to not eat real food, to be told that real foods just aren't the way anymore. So instead, have this meal replacement bar that is, loaded with sugars, but it's low in carbs. it's, it's like, it's just somewhere along the way, real food became the enemy when we've got to change that conversation.
Yeah, and let's unpack that a little bit more, right? This idea of like meal replacement in a little kind of like 2x4 bar, right? These kind of energy bars. Um, you know, as carbohydrates do, as we've touched on, is the form of energy for the body. Um, any form of like kind of reduced size snack food is, I feel like, only going to influence the hunger cycle, right? It's not actually
Mm-hmm.
going to satisfy you. And I think this is also going to kind of open up the conversation about the relationship of food, right? Which is a
Yeah.
really tricky relationship. It's one that I work on every day, right? There's been
Yeah.
successes
Yeah.
and there's been kind of days I need to work a little bit more. But eating carbohydrates with, always paired with a form of protein, right? So my practices are kind of no naked carbs, right? The
Mm-hmm.
carbs are going to give you the energy, but that protein source, whether it's yogurt, cottage cheese, or some kind of lean meat, that's what's going to keep you full. So it's that team together that's going to help. And essentially, like, feeling full for 2 or 3 hours is what we want to feel, right? We don't want our body to be kind of starving or craving for these foods, because one of the problems about carbohydrates is that they are so easy. Like, we don't have to cook anything. We can open a box of pretzels, or we can pull out a slice of bread, and just and eat it. They're hyper palatable, and most often they are processed, right? And of
Yeah.
course, there are all these fantastic unprocessed versions like fruits,
Mm-hmm.
vegetables, things down that road. But anytime that we're trying to like meal replace or kind of, supplement our diet with this snack food that's packaged as healthy or, as fuel, it's never going to do what whole foods or what a whole meal can. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes those bars are loaded with calories, um, changing your body composition, whether you're trying to build more muscle or lose fat, or kind of somewhere in between, or working both of those. It's always going to be a number of calories, right? What you're
Yeah.
doing to fuel your body, how many calories that you're burning, and et cetera. And so when you're grabbing these things, it's just you can so easily increase your calories with not properly nourishing and not properly satisfying yourself, which then later on you're going to go grab something else, right? All
Yeah.
of our days are busy. I'm just going to assume that nobody that I really talk to is walking around and be like, I have all of this time to
Yeah.
meal prep and my life is so leisurely. No, we all have jobs, we have side hustles, we have families, we have relationships. But there is truth to like having some kind of meal prep, or even meal prep snacks for those quick kind of grab and goes that
Mm-hmm.
are accessible, whether they're in your purse or in your fridge or kind of like in your locker, wherever you are, with a balanced amount of your macros, your carbohydrates, your proteins, and your fats, because all three of those are important. Like, it would be
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous to say protein and carbs are now what's important and don't have fats. Your body can't function without fat. Your body can't function without protein, and your body can't function without, carbohydrates.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, you touching on those meal replacements, it brought me back to like 5 years ago, whenever I really, really decided to try and drop weight for the first time in my life. I had found myself really heavy, and because of this whole diet culture, I thought to myself, okay, I found this meal replacement strategy. That's what's going to work. I'm going to drop the weight super fast and I'm going to keep it off for good. Yeah, well, easier said than done because, like you said, you're constantly hungry. You're not actually fueling your body to any degree. Of course, you're going to lose the weight because you're starving yourself essentially. And nobody can live on freeze dried food for the rest of their life. It's just not sustainable. So after I dropped the weight, what happened? I gained it all right back, double time. And how frustrating is that? And how like defeating is that mentally? You
Yes.
know, it's like my body blew right back up to where it was before. I was probably even more malnourished at that point than I was prior because I hadn't fed myself properly for, 60 days. And I was like bigger than ever. And I felt so exhausted and defeated.
Yeah.
And and that's why I feel so grateful right now for having this conversation with you and sharing this with other people because I know somebody else feels that way or has experienced something like that. And to know, like to hear, it's okay to eat real food. And it's okay that the process, the journey to wellness takes time to actually create a lifestyle change that is not something you have to constantly be like feeling guilty about not sticking to or having that super super high exerted effort of like, oh gosh, I just didn't eat the right thing today. It becomes so much more just ingrained in your day-to-day life when you start to really learn about whole foods. And instead of grabbing that meal replacement bar, why don't you grab a couple strawberries, maybe a few pieces of pineapple, a little bit of cottage cheese? Guarantee you'll be
Yes.
hungry or you'll be full for 2 to 3 hours, as opposed to that meal replacement bar.
Yes.
You'll be hungry in 30 minutes.
And
Right.
you're fueling you're yeah, you're fueling your body too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once I started making those really simple changes away from only doing high fats, because that's what I did for about 10 months. I did a keto diet. It did work, but at a certain point, I could feel that my body was being depleted of something, and I couldn't put my finger on it until you and I had a conversation earlier this year. And I said, there's something that I'm missing. I feel like I've dropped my weight, but I'm missing something. There's low energy. I just don't feel as strong as I used to. And you said, you need to eat more carbs. And I'm like, oh gosh, that's so scary because I've not been eating carbs, for 10 months. And that's how
Yeah.
I dropped the weight. So yeah, it might have taken me a little longer if I had been integrating carbs, but I don't think I would have gotten to that roadblock that I had earlier this year where I felt really weak and I just knew that there was something that my body was missing out on. And ever since I have been reintroducing carbohydrates into my day, it's amazing. I have energy like no other. I've been exercising, and really enjoying the exercise sort of process, getting back into the gym, getting strong. And it's crazy how like your muscles aren't as sore for as long when they have this nutrients to
Fuel.
really
Fuel.
like fuel it and to repair
Yeah.
and to just be healthy. And yeah, it really opens your mind when you start allowing and trusting that, Mother Nature is there for us to support us and we need to just like get with the program. Um,
Yeah.
So, okay, you guys, I'm going to share something with you really quickly because, like I said, drop carbs in the comments below. If you want a copy of the workbook, I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of what that looks like. Because today I would like you guys to go into your pantry or your fridge, and I would love for you to start sorting your carbs. So, this is what your workbook looks like. And so for today, we're going to try to just sort the carbs. Like, spend a few minutes, take this list here, and let's try to figure out what do we already have on hand that we're maybe just ignoring and thinking it's something that we should not be eating because we're, quote, on a diet. All right. So, things like brown rice, sweet potatoes, whole grains, which, by the way, I've got a fantastic recipe for you guys on day 3. So be sure to come back on Wednesday. And it's packed with some really, really fantastic carbs that are super healthy for you. Apples. Apples have been one of my absolute favorite snacks. If you get a nice big apple and chop it up, it'll last you 2 days, you know. Asparagus and peppers, cauliflower, mushrooms, broccoli, chia seeds, whole fruits, right? Don't get the canned stuff. That stuff's loaded with sugar, and whole vegetables. So be sure to get your copy of the workbook so that way you can just kind of help yourself sort the carbs. I know a lot of us, we don't necessarily know what to look for sometimes. So it's just a way to kind of help it out. How about you, Joni? What are, like, off of this list of complex carbs, what are some of your go-tos? Like I guess let me do a share screen again. Because I know, like you said, you used to be a vegetarian and now you're not. But are you guys doing like lots of sweet potatoes? What's your like go-tos for when it comes to the carbs that you integrate into your day? Can you hear me? Uh-oh, we might have lost. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Oh, weird. Okay. All right. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up, and you guys come back tomorrow. We're going to continue the discussion on how to grocery shop for some of the nutrient dense carbs that we've been talking about. And I might even do a grocery haul with you guys. So I know Joni can't hear me right now, but thank you. Love you. And we're going to be talking soon.